Hello. Are you Aaron? I think you're on mute for the moment, but I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Hello?
There you go. Yep.
Sell the keys for food. Where the changes mood. Spring is here again. Reproduct your plan. And he's the one who likes all our pretty songs. And he likes to sing along. And he likes to shoot his gun. But he knows not what it means. Knows not what it means. And I say, he's the one who likes all our pretty songs. And he likes to sing along. And he likes to shoot his gun. But he knows not what it means. Knows not what it means. And I say, yeah. We can have some more. Nature is a whore. Bruises on the fruit. Tender age in bloom. And he's the one who likes all our pretty songs. And he likes to sing along. And he likes to shoot his gun. But he knows not what it means. Knows not what it means. And I say, he's the one who likes all our pretty songs. And he likes to sing along. And he likes to shoot his gun. But he knows not what it means. Knows not what it means. And I say, yeah. And he's the one who likes all our pretty songs. And he likes to sing along. And he likes to shoot his gun. But he knows not what it means. Knows not what it means. And I say, he's the one who likes all our pretty songs. And he likes to sing along. And he likes to shoot his gun. But he knows not what it means. Knows not what it means. And I say, yeah. And I say, yeah.
Love can touch us one time and last for a lifetime and never let go till we're gone. Every night in my dreams I see you, I feel you. That is how I know you go on. Far across the distance and spaces between us, you have come to show you go on. Yeah. Wherever you are, I believe that the heart does go on. Once more, open the door, and you're here in my heart, and my heart will go on. Love will touch us one time and last for a lifetime and never let go till we're gone. Love was when I loved you one true time. I hold you, and my life will always go on and on and on and on. Yeah. Wherever you are, I believe that the heart does go on. train. If you just lay down your tracks, you could have an aeroplane flying. If you bring your blue skies back, all you do is call me. I'll be anything you need. You could have a big dipper going up and down around the bend. You could have a bumper car pumping. This amusement never ends. I wanna be the sledgehammer. Why don't you call my name? Oh, you better call the sledgehammer. And this will be my testimony. Sledgehammer. Show me around your fruitcake, and I will be your honeybee. Open up your fruitcake, where the fruit as sweet as can be. I wanna be the sledgehammer.
Hey, everybody.
Why don't you
Court's running across campus. He'll be here as soon as he can, and then as soon as he is, we'll begin Podful Casts. Oh, what do you know? He's logging into Zoom right now. Isn't that just handy? Hold on. Podful Casts will begin in just a few.
I've kicked a habit. Shed my skin. You know this is a new start. I go dancing in. Won't you show for me? And I will show for you. Please show for me. And I will show for you. Yeah, 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 I do mean you. Oh, only you. You've been coming through. We're gonna build that power. Build up that power. Oh, feeding the rhythm. I've been feeding the rhythm. Gonna feel that power. Yeah, building you. Oh, come on, help me through. Come on, help me through. Yeah, 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 yeah. I've been feeding the rhythm. I've been feeding the rhythm. This can be my testimony.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kinda dumb with a finger and a thumb in the shape of an L on her forehead. Well, you see,
Welcome to the Virtual Stab Comedy Theater. It's time for Podful Casts. Please welcome to the screen your hosts, Court and Charlie.
Hello.
Hi.
Greetings, virtual audience, and thank you for attending our show. This is Podful Casts, which is a play on a certain author's work.
Yeah.
Court, who is that author, and what are we going to talk about on this show?
Oh, he's kind of a young upstart. This author. He's not a lot of people have heard of him. We're just kind of trying to get his work out there so that he can build up an audience. His name is Stephen King.
Stephen King. Steve King,
he
a
has-
budding writer.
Yeah. He has about 80 novels in short story collection. We're just doing what we can to spread the good word about Mr. King and his work.
Exactly. Well, and specifically, Mr. King has had a lot of his work adapted into various other forms of media, books, well, not other books, but movies, TV shows, and all sorts of other good stuff, particularly movies and TV shows. And so, what this show is, for those of you listening and watching, is a show where we have a guest on and they pick a Stephen King adaptation that is of particular interest to them, whether that be their favorite or one they just want to talk about. And we all watch it, and then we hop on here and we all chat about it. And yeah, we've got another good one for you today. In fact, this is the first one. Last episode we did Storm of the Century, which is one of Stephen King's only works that is not an adaptation because he wrote the script directly for TV. This time we actually do have a real adaptation, which is a 1987 novel called The Tommyknockers that in 1993 was adapted into a TV miniseries.
Yes, it was.
It was, yes. And
Yeah.
and well, Court, do you want to let everyone know exactly who it was that picked the Tommyknockers for us to watch and get him in here to talk?
So when we announced the show, this person was one of the first people to show excitement and be recruited to be a guest on the show, and he provided us with some. Basically, he said he wanted to do some of the weirder '90s adaptations, I think was the phrasing, and we decided that the best option would, of course, be the Tommyknockers. And the person who picked that is Eric Wynn, one of the hosts of the Goth Yearbook radio show. Welcome to the screen, Eric.
All right. Let's
Hi.
get him in here. Welcome,
Hello.
Eric.
Am I officially in here? Hello, everyone.
I believe
Yes, that's-
so, yeah.
That's correct. I am Eric Wynn, aka the Eric Wynn. I host a little show called Goth Yearbook. And Court is correct. I was very excited when I saw that you guys were going to be putting together a Stephen King show. And I did want to pick some like mid 90s. Basically, because I can't pick like a Brian De Palma movie or Shawshank because I'm like, I'd be too reverent to it. So I was like, I want something I can maybe like knock down a peg or two because it's also stuff I grew up on.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I found the messages from that day and I said, well, my top choices would be Tommyknockers, Langoliers, or Needful Things, which your guys' show is called Needful Things. I'm so glad. I wasn't even thinking about the time because I was so excited. That would have been way too much pressure 2 episodes into. That's got to be your last episode years from now when you guys have won all the podcast awards and all that.
Exactly.
That'll be the last episode. That was so the hubris of me to be like, to try to call that one 2 episodes in. I'm really glad. That would have been too much pressure. So yeah, I'm glad we went with Tommyknockers. Boy howdy. I don't know whether you guys should be thanking me or I should be apologizing to you for making you all.
Well, much like the titular Tommyknockers, it's your influence upon us is inscrutable and a gift in some ways and a great curse in others. So
yeah, you give us a lot of ideas and a lot of energy, but also our teeth are falling.
Yeah, I've lost so many teeth, and I'm growing a single huge boob on the front of my body, and it's horrible.
That's the Tommyknocker.
That's the Tommy.
That
That's
is the
what it is.
Tommyknocker.
That's
Yeah.
the name. Actually, is where that's where it comes from.
The singular knocker.
The knocker, yeah, the single knocker. Well, Eric, so in general, obviously you're also a Stephen King fan, and we asked our guest this last time, and I'm curious, like, what was the first Stephen King thing that you were exposed to, whether that be one of his books or one of his movies? What sparked it for you? Do you remember?
Okay, so no hyperbole, like no lies here. I think Tommyknockers might have been the first thing that I ever saw, but I didn't know it was Stephen King because if you grow up in like the late 80s, early 90s, especially if you have older siblings like I did, like VHS tapes, like they'd come in your house and you didn't have many, so you would just rewatch the hell out of like that one. And one of the ones we had was Tommyknockers. And I can vividly recall me and my sisters would like watch it all the time. And and I don't think I understood what was going on. I don't think we ever made it to tape 2. I think we probably only watched like the first tape. But that was like my first introduction to him, but didn't know who he was. I wasn't able to like have that concept. The first, I was huge on him like pretty early on though. Like I was a big Goosebumps fan, book wise, and the natural progression I feel like for a lot of people of a certain age group of a certain demographic is like you get really into the Goosebumps. I was saying this to my wife earlier, but like it starts off with Goosebumps. If we on my show on Got the Yearbook, we did a lot of Goosebumps like breakdowns like a few years ago, and like the thing R.L. Stine, the authors of those, or the ghostwriter, they would always be like the chapter would be like ending with like, and then a knife came at you, and the very next chapter would be like, it was my sister being a prankster, and like,
oh yeah, they'd always fake you out. Yeah,
yeah,
no, I can remember
so
that too. Yeah,
it was great to like move on over to Stephen King, where it'd be like, because I think the first book I ever read of his was Pet Cemetery, so it'd be like the chapter ends like, my son got ran over, and the very next chapter was like, I was drunk at the funeral. It's like,
yeah,
oh, shit.
It's not like
just a prank.
yeah, it's not like, oh, my son, the truck came towards my son, and then it missed him, and oh, I was very scared. Yeah, no, that boy gets crushed for sure.
Oh, he gets splattered like yesterday's pancakes. But
yeah,
that was my first book. It's a very dark book, and I was super into it. I don't think I like understood the power of King though. It's so funny because I just had a guest on my show last week, and we were talking about Stephen King on that episode because it was like fresh in my mind. And I had almost the same trajectory as her because I went from Pet Cemetery right into It. Maybe read one of his short story collections. He's a fucking short story god, by the way. Like that's I think some of his biggest strengths are the short story.
I agree.
But It, my God, I mean, what can be said about it? It's a beautiful book. It's like his, thesis on like horror in general and like on writing, and it's a really beautiful book. And that's like when that's when I locked into like the vocabulary of King, like the Americana aspect of King, all the things that makes him distinctly who he is, like his weird idioms that I feel like he makes up that like he has children say, like he has kids say weird shit like, I'll be a ass of a monkey on a leech, or like things where like I don't think kids say that, and like
yeah,
and he'll be writing it in the 80s, but like he uses terminology from the 50s, but I don't know, it's very weird. He's also very perverted. I mean, I love it. I love the guy. He speaks to me. I get it. You know what I mean? I'm also a recovering addict, just like Mr. King, and like I'm a sucker of like his analogies to like addiction, which this Tommyknockers, the book, is an analogy to that, but I mean, all of King's works are analogies to, I feel like, besides maybe like Carrie. Like every book of his can be linked to like his drinking and cocaine use.
Yeah, he really, and people, I don't know if people criticize it, but it's often like so many characters in Stephen King works are versions of him, and often a lot of them are alcoholics or recovering alcoholics or lapsed alcoholics, and I don't know, he writes about those characters so well and in such a way that's like so compelling and it is one of the things that I think makes his work stand out is like even like in preparation for this I listened to the audiobook of the Tommyknockers, which I had never read fully, and
yes,
honestly, some of my favorite parts of it were just like following Jim Gardner, one of the main characters, around, and he's like in his struggles with addiction and all this stuff. He writes very honestly about that in a way that's very compelling outside of any genre stuff, and I agree that that's a really cool aspect of his work.
You talked about how Goosebumps was kind of like a runway to Stephen King, and that's something that Charlie and I have talked about. Mm-hmm. Is how there are like different properties that we enjoyed as kids that were kind of like preparation for the authors that we would get into as adults. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was cool you mentioned that because
The Sandlot.
We talked about how The Sandlot is like a proto Stephen King story. You've got like the narrator, who's like you got like childhood fears. A narrator who is in the future talking about how he doesn't see his old friends anymore. Totally. When I was a kid, like The Sandlot and Stand By Me were kind of like, I didn't realize that Stand By Me was a R-rated drama. I thought it was just like another kids movie like The Sandlot. Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
blowing my mind. Yeah, that's I've never made that connection before, but they are. The Sandlot has like all the trappings, like in the best kind of way. Like there's a group of them. This guy has this thing going on. There's like the
Yeah.
kind of like weird threat of maybe an abusive stepdad, but not. Like
Yeah, there's
Dennis
like
Leary.
family dynamics. There's
Yeah,
like
the dog.
Americana, the one
Yeah.
magical summer thing. There's a monster, kind of, that's a monster.
Oh my gosh, you guys are totally right. And it's like,
Yeah,
and King is a huge baseball head too. So
right.
like,
Mhm.
God, like did he ghostwrite it? I've never even thought.
I know
about
you
it
wonder. Yeah, it's
before.
like maybe he had another pen name that no one ever discovered aside from Richard Bachman, where he wrote like The Sandlot and
Yeah.
like diet, children's versions of his stories. It's a good way to, like I said, yeah. Court and I both watched The Sandlot a lot as kids, and I think it definitely that
Same.
the whole vibe of it very much primed me to like something like It or Stand by Me or any of those other sort of things that end up being Stephen King hallmarks.
Yeah.
Well, and to segue very gently, I think one of the things that's interesting about the Tommyknockers, both the book and the show, is that I won't say it's fully a departure from Stephen King's usual stuff because a lot of the same stuff is there. Like you got their small town in Maine, you got weird happenings, you have a character who's a struggling writer who's also an alcoholic, but this story, this novel, which came out in 1987, and it's a long book, one of his longer ones, and it's basically his take on, and I believe he's said this directly, it's his take on H.P. Lovecraft's classic story, The Color Out of Space, which is about a meteorite crashes in a remote New England farm, and a sort of a being that's an indescribable color seeps out of it and begins to poison and warp all the living things around it, including all the people that live there. And the Tommyknockers is sort of Stephen King's take on that. It's about
Turns out the color out of space is green.
It's green. It's definitely green.
It's a lot of green.
There's a lot of green in both the book and the movie. Green is the color out of space for Stephen King, and it is funny because I mean, in Lovecraft's story, right? It's in classic Lovecraft fashion. It's very unknowable and indescribable, and Stephen King is not afraid to know and describe many things about the Tommyknockers. Sometimes to the detriment of the overall story, but it's basically about this.
He goes on. If you read the book or listen to the audiobook, pages upon pages describing digging and a woman's menstrual cycle. The man is not afraid to spend chapters describing things that maybe he should just quit at like page 1.
Or like a paragraph, like maybe a paragraph for that one, Stephen. But yeah, so it's basically like the premise for both the book and the movie, and we can talk about the differences between the two, and obviously we're here to focus mainly on the movie. But the premise is basically this, which is that there's a small Maine town out in the woods, and the one magical summer, a bunch of strange goings on transpire, and they're linked to a buried alien ship that's out in the woods, and it's been there for, in the book I believe they say like literally like hundreds of thousands of years, but a very long time, and it's putting out these sort of strange signals, and the more of the ship, the closer to it you are, or the more of it that's uncovered, the weirder you get, and it alters your brain in particular, and then also your body more so in the book, and it gives you fantastic ideas for crazy inventions that are like beyond anything knowable by science, and it also sort of warps your mind into wanting to uncover the ship and sort of become, the phrase in the book and in the show is you're sort of merging with the aliens in the ship and doing their bidding, and it follows a number of characters. The main two characters are Bobby Anderson, who's a writer, unsurprisingly for a Stephen King book, and she lives out in the woods with her dog, and then she is in the book they're sort of former lovers, but in the show they're still in a relationship. She's dating this guy named Jim Gardner, who's a poet and struggling with alcoholism, as many Stephen King characters are. And then there's sort of a secondary cast of characters that fill out the town. You got the sheriff, you got this grandpa whose grandson goes missing, and there's sort of all these weird events transpire. We can, I think to summarize the entire plot would be rather exhaustive, particularly on part of the book. But point being, all these people start to change and quote unquote become, and then they become hostile to those who aren't part of the town or who aren't affected by the ship. And Jim Gardner, the poet character, has a metal plate in his head from a skiing accident. So he's impervious to the ship's mind waves. And also, as the story progresses, everyone in the town becomes basically telepathic, which is an ability the ship gives them. And people with metal in their heads are impervious to that as well. So they're kind of the people that are the only ones that remain sane as the Tommyknockers start to just warp everyone's mind. So anyway, the miniseries came out in 1993, and that's what we watched for this episode. So I don't know, what are your guys' initial thoughts on the miniseries? So leaving the book aside, just as a work of its own, what do you guys think?
I kind of liked it. It's like weirdly charming for how poor its reputation is. I didn't find it particularly like. It wasn't like none of the drama worked. A lot of the acting didn't work. The sets and the special effects didn't work. Nothing about it really worked, but there's something weird about it that I found like strangely compelling and charming. I don't. Maybe it was because it felt like a little like an episode of the X-Files, and so maybe it was just because Bobby Anderson has like red hair cut into a bob, like Scully, and so I was just like, oh yeah, this is like X-Files.
This is like X-Files.
One of my notes when I was writing it was the X-Files synth music never stops.
Yeah, literally, it'll be a character just like walking down the street, and there will be ominous synth music,
Yeah, like,
menacing synth. Yeah, they're hitting that hard. Yeah, another thing is, I wonder if this is direct on the part of the makers or anything, but like another big hit with at least on a baseline a similar premise from that same exact era of TV is Twin Peaks. You have a small town with all these weird happenings and
bizarre acting choices.
Weird bad soap opera acting. You have like a lot of the same elements, and this in places reminded me of sort of a knockoff version of Twin Peaks. Obviously, it goes in a way different direction, but that also sort of sprang like a weird X-Files Twin Peaks hybrid with plenty of Stephen King thrown in. Well, Eric, so you watched this all the time on VHS as a kid, and presumably you've watched it again recently. So, like, what's your overall take on the series?
Well, so I'm a big fan of actually something that's not good, like for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm all about something that has like unintentional camp or a B film type thing, whatever you want to call it. Like I'm all there for it. I did write a note. I made extensive, exhaustive notes list on my notes app.
And I got some too. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my notes was I did have to be fair, and I wrote a note that just said this movie is bad. And
just to remind yourself.
Yeah, I'll say this: the time on it, because since it was a miniseries, it's broken up into things. And when you watch, how did you guys watch? By the way, I could only find it on YouTube. Did you
watch it on YouTube? Yeah, it's on YouTube.
So it was like the full 3-hour thing, or 2 hour 52 minutes, and so there came a time where I was like, the enjoyment of it, I was like, okay, it's now kind of laborious, a little bit laborious to get through this, but a condensed version of it would be something I'd like throw on when friends are over all the time for sure, because I'm a sucker for, it's like a lot of great people involved too. Like a lot of those actors are actually great in other things. I mean, I've always been on the fence about Jimmy Smits. I have always wondered if Jimmy Smits is a good actor or if he's just in good stuff, but I love him nonetheless. There's something like very, I don't know, there's a magnifying presence. I'm sorry. There is something magnanimous about him that I really enjoy. And the X-Files thing was off the charts for me. I had to look up. I was just curious if Mark Frost did the music, and he did not, because it was so on point, and like the set design, like I had to look it up. I'm sure X-Files started in 93 as well, so there had to have been some, like, I don't know, a little bit of like layover people working on the two projects behind the scenes at some point, even just props department or something. But yeah, overall, I mean, he fucking got Tracy Lords in it. It's 10 out of 10 for me. Like, what else do you need? I mean, I love it. You have Tracy Lords. like shooting cops with a fucking lipstick that like zaps them, and the sound effects. I mean, we can't get into the minute details, but the sound effects whenever she would use it, the like that was like straight out of like an old Hanna-Barbera cartoon. I mean, I love
Yeah.
it. I mean, everything about it didn't really work, like Gordon said, and that's I love a movie that's like that.
Yeah, it's very much a it's whatever the opposite of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. Like the whole is less than the sum of its parts for sure. Like
Yeah,
if you look at it,
absolutely.
bird's eye view, it's like this is a pretty shitty show. But yeah, I enjoyed aspects of it too. I think now as I mentioned, I just also in preparation for this listened to the audiobook of the book, and it's kind of you got like layers here, right? Because it's not considered Stephen King's best book, and then the
Yeah,
adaptation is considered to be like a downgrade from the book. So I think that skewed me a little bit because I mean I rather enjoyed the book. I don't think it's Stephen King's best or anything, but I thought it was really good and I enjoyed the whole thing.
what was yours? Is the audiobook that you're going through? Is that read by Edward Herman of Gilmore Girls,
Yes.
Lost
Yeah.
Boys
Yes.
fame?
Yeah, and he's great. He's a really good narrator, which really
So
kills
good.
it. Yeah.
Him doing like the aforementioned like the pages and pages talking about Bobby's menstrual cycle because the spaceship is affecting it, and you hear it with Edward Herman's like Anglophile little stank on it. Is
Yeah,
like
he's got
the
such a
listener at
great,
home.
such a great.
He's got a
voice.
really good narrator voice. He also doesn't do this thing that I notice with audiobooks a lot, which is where he doesn't do like a cartoon high pitched voice for women, which is really important because if you're
Yeah.
locking in for like a 30-hour book and someone does like a weird like, oh, I don't know, we gotta go
Yeah, but-
like if you did that,
Make-
if you do that, like it's unlistenable. So I'm glad that he doesn't do that for sure.
He's actually, I mean, credits to the man. Rest in peace, because I think he passed away a few years ago. Rest in power, man. He like lets out just a little bit of like bass, but he doesn't like go high. He just makes
Mhm.
like his voice feel lighter without being like patronizing with it. Like he is his actual masterful narrator. I'll give
This is
him
a
that.
real talent for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I enjoyed the audiobook a lot. And I think it did skew my reading of the show because the show, even though it's like almost 3 hours long, it felt very rushed because I just listened
Yes.
to 30 hours of the same story. And it does change a lot of the plot points for better and worse in some ways. Like I would say the book overall is a lot grosser and
Oh yeah.
and it has a bad ending. And like I also think that it's a ballsy one to try to adapt, especially for TV, where you're not allowed to do a lot of like gross shit and you're working with a limited budget because the book A is like very heavily interior focused. Like a lot of the changes that the Tommyknockers, which by the way, if we haven't said it, the Tommyknockers are the aliens. And it's like a name that's given to them from like an old nursery rhyme about sort of mysterious things that go bump in the night. There's like these rhymes that come throughout the book, and the Tommyknockers are sort of haphazardly given that name because they're kind of these unknowable, creepy things. I mean, when the Tommyknockers influence people in the book, a lot of it's very internal until they outwardly start seeing things in the real world that like speak to them or like weird shit starts to happen. A lot of it is like feelings and like a sense of unease or like body changes that you don't really want to talk about. Like one of the really like sort of strange and sort of gross things that happens when Bobby Anderson, who's the one that discovers the ship, when she's spending a lot of time and she gets obsessed with digging this thing up, she like can't stop menstruating. Like it, and as Eric said, like King talks about that a lot. But it is like it's like
Great detail
unsettling.
for many pages.
Yeah, and it's like it's one of the many like there's a lot of body horror in the book that's very like, and I mean that's like just the tip of the iceberg. Like people start to like their teeth fall out and they sort of basically display a lot of the signs that you get if you got like a high dose of radiation or something. Their hair falls out, their skin becomes all transparent. At one point, they do start growing tentacles later in the book. And so there's this whole
someone like comes out of like
process.
someone's like vagina. I think like they mentioned like tentacles
Yeah.
coming from between a lady's legs and shit.
Yeah,
Fucking, it's creepy. It's fucked up.
weird, gross stuff that like if you could do it visually, you couldn't do it on TV, and B, but the rest of it is all internal. So that's like a big challenge for adapting a work like this. Whereas like something like like I don't know, Cujo or like another Stephen King work, like there's less. Some of the horror is a little more like distilled into one thing that you can visually represent. This one, it is very nebulous for a lot of the story, and I thought that was something that they clearly struggled with in adapting it. But I think they went kind of the B movie sci-fi route, and that's fun too. Like I liked, they kind of distilled it down, and it's less sweeping than the book was, but you still get some fun, like people making weird gizmos and like a lot of green light, and even the alien, and like I think Court, you said that the effects are not good, but I kind of like them still because they have that early '90s charm where they did have to do a lot of practical effects, and it's not like I think you hit a real dead zone with TV movies, like I don't know, like from like the late end of the '90s through like I don't know, like the next decade or so, where you're getting like real bad CGI, and I think this is slightly before that was a thing. So it actually
this will always look better than the bad TV CGI.
Exactly.
Absolutely,
yeah.
100%.
No matter how floppy the rubber aliens are, they look like a real thing.
They're tangible. Yeah, exactly.
They're tangible.
And I think
like,
that was a big strength.
Floppy is an adjective that you can like. You can put yourself in Jimmy Smith's shoes and like be like, okay, so if I were to throw this floppy alien,
it's so
it would feel like this. But if it was just like a CGI thing, then there's no way that you can relate.
There's no weight to those sorts of things, and especially with that type of a budget. Like, yeah, you look at like a TV show or a TV movie from even like 7 years after this, and it probably would have been like all bad CGI. But they had to actually build all that stuff, and like the part when Jimmy Smith goes in the shed, which is a big part of the book too. The shed is kind of like the nexus of gross alien experimentation outside of the ship. It's Bobby's shed, and she has like her dog, and in the book it's like her sister and the old man whose grandson goes missing. They all end up out in the shed, like all hooked up to tubes and stuff. And I thought they did a pretty good job. Like in the movie, it looks cheesy, like, but it looks like real and like gross and weird. They got like tubes coming out of them, and like there's all the green light everywhere and stuff. And I thought it was good. They did a nice job with stuff like that,
Yeah, it kind of looked like
you...
the grandpa with like the belt wrapped around his head. Kind of looked like a low grade version of like when Star Trek characters would get taken by the Borg or whatever.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah.
Had like that vibe to it.
Did either of you look into the production of the movie?
Not too much, no.
Because I did.
Take it away, Cor. Let's hear this.
So
some of these notes.
So the adaptation was announced, and there was a different director, someone who I think I forget what else he did, but something else King related that was better received. Maybe it was like Cat's Eye or something. I don't know. But they rushed it. They were like, we got to have this out by spring of next year. And it's set very noticeably during the summer. Mm-hmm. And this was in the winter of the year before it was supposed to come out. So there was nowhere that they could really shoot a convincing summer New England. So they had to move the whole shoot to New Zealand, move all these sets and like weird,
that's crazy.
Weird like there was something with like flammable liquids that they needed for some of the special effects that got stopped in Singapore. They thought they were trying to like build a bomb or something. So there were all kinds of delays when they were trying to rush this thing out, maybe to coincide with the X-Files, the mania.
No, they were building a bomb, all right.
Yeah. Hey. But so they had to shoot it in New Zealand, and then they had to change a bunch of stuff because the guy that played the grandpa was so old that he like couldn't do physically the things that part required, especially when he was traveling across the world to film this piece of shit.
Yeah, they sent him thousands of miles,
and they had to ship like the actual like set designs for like alien ship and stuff like that, and they built a little mock town in New Zealand. It's like impressive how much effort they put into something that came out so like poorly.
Yeah,
that's so weird. Yeah, I would have bet if you had asked me right before you told me that, if you had asked me to like bet money on like where I think they filmed this, I would have said like Canada right? Because that's always
Yeah,
where they shoot
it's
stuff.
always
I mean,
Canada.
even the early X-Files is all shot in like Vancouver, right? And this has the
Mhm.
look of like a Canadian, or even like I've been watching. I don't know why I keep watching it because I don't like it that much, but it's fine. Which is The Last of Us, that new HBO show. And
Mhm.
there's like a hilarious moment in the episode last week where it cuts to this scene where there's these massive snowy mountains and this beautiful pine forest and a river, and it says 10 miles west of Boston.
Oh yeah, I heard about
Now,
that.
I have been to Boston. 10 miles west of Boston is more Boston. Like it does not look like that.
It's
Like
just Jamaica Plains. It's nothing fancy.
it's like it's like still Boston. It's like it's crazy. Yeah, and that show is another one that's a Canadian production, and you can tell.
Yeah.
With Maine, at least you can get away with like a Canadian production because it's like they're right next to each other. But
Yeah.
I'm very surprised to hear that this was produced in New Zealand.
Usually you see New Zealand films, like the rare ones that are there, like something like a Peter Jackson thing. You're like, oh my
Right.
god, I need tickets to go there immediately. I saw this, I'm like, I don't need to go there.
Yeah, it looks
And
pretty
th-
normal. They make it
this
look pretty
was-
normal.
And this was so long before the Lord of the Rings movies brought like massive filmmaking to New Zealand, so
Yeah.
they had to deal with a bunch of people
Yeah.
that had never worked on a movie before, like
Yeah.
the like crew and stuff for the movie. So it must have been a very frustrating shoot for everyone involved. I think they couldn't get Jimmy Smits during they couldn't get him at the time that they were filming the climactic showdown with the alien. So they had to like cut around it by like not showing them in the same shot.
Oh,
That's hilarious.
See, I noticed that, but I thought it was just because they had to film the rubber aliens a certain way or something. But yeah, you're right. You can tell that he's not in the same shots.
And the main rubber alien was played by like a 5'3" like ballet dancer.
Yeah,
That
I saw the
seems like a
picture
good
you
choice.
posted of her on the show the other day.
Yeah,
That seems like a good choice, honestly.
that's some of the production notes there.
Now that's really interesting. I did not know that this was filmed in New Zealand. That's an interesting. I'm very fascinated by like movies that are meant to be set in like, especially like in the United States or something, that are filmed in such like wildly different places. Like I think one I can think of is like that remake of The Hills Have Eyes that came out in 2006. Was filmed. It's meant to be set in like, I don't know, New Mexico or whatever, right? But they filmed it in Morocco of all places.
Really, it looks like it's like filmed on Mars or something.
Yeah, and I guess because they wanted that really like particularly barren, like alien desert look to it, which works because it's a real gross, scary movie about the desert. But I don't know, there's something about that that's like such a weird cognitive dissonance for me, where it's like, oh, this is meant to be the United States, and they shipped a bunch of stuff that looks like the United States, and they put it in another country. It's just, I don't know, something about it is always weirdly fascinating to me. So this is a New Zealand one, which is an interesting point.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else sort of stood out to me. Let me look at my notes here.
While you're looking at them, can we just talk real quickly about some of the dialogue? I don't know how much of this is taken directly from the book, because it's been a minute since I've actually I am in the middle of reading Needful Things, which I feel like is similar to Tommyknockers, and I personally would say it's better than Tommyknockers. Like it expands on like the same similar vibes. So I keep kind of getting messed up of where it came from what, but the ones I had to give a shout out to was, what kind of a dim bulb question is that? Again, that had to be King, because that's such a like old hokey thing. And then my other one was when I'm already blanking on the characters' names, but when the guy and his wife are arguing, he goes, "But is what a goat has for brains." After she keeps going, but. That's just great writing right there. That's great.
That's very
writing.
Very Stephen King, yeah. When the performances in this vary very widely. Like, I mean, I would agree that like I can never tell if Jimmy Smits is like actually a good actor or not, or if he's just like a good TV actor. And I can't recall what the other things I've seen him in. I remember him being in Dexter, which I watched like a long time ago, and he was like fine in that. I think
Did you guys watch Did you watch The West Wing when he plays President Santos, like in the later seasons?
Oh no, I never watched The West Wing.
So
he's the president. Okay.
He played like he is Martin Sheen's predecessor, and I don't think he's good. And to this day, I feel like I'm being either gaslit by Hollywood or I'm just wrong about it. Like that's why I'm always very curious. I'm like, maybe Jimmy Smits is like a brilliant actor. I'll say his a lot of his drunk acting in this was just flat out terrible. But when he's at the party and he's like twirling around with the fucking umbrella and shit, I was actually really into it. I was like laughing. I was like, that's good drunk acting right there.
There's a little
He
moment
sells that
when
one.
he's when Bobby first takes him out to see the excavation site. There's a little moment
Yeah.
where he kind of like trips while he's sliding down a little hill of dirt, and he does like a little like face at it, and it's just this tiny, tiny little moment, but it's
I
really
didn't catch that.
funny.
It's great.
Yeah, that was the moment that made me realize that he's great in this.
Yeah,
I thought he was good. Yeah, I thought he was the best performance in it. And yeah, and much like everything else in this movie, it's like I don't think he's like a great actor or that the performance is like particularly awesome. I just think he's like the best one, and like he's like you were saying, Eric, he's very watchable. I like watching him
Yes.
do stuff, even if
Undeniable.
it's not acting well. I'm like, I'm interested to see what this guy's up to. Yeah, his drunk acting is very funny. There's a scene. The scene is both in the book and in the movie, which is where Jim Gardner, who is a poet, relapses and drinks very heavily at like an after party after a poetry reading, and like
Yeah.
causes a huge scene. And in the book, he's obsessed with the danger presented by nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
And they give like a few lines of it in the movie, but in the book, he gets into this huge argument with this guy who works at a nuclear power plant, who happens to be at this poetry reading, and like gets in a massive argument with him, and is sort of makes a huge scene, and that spirals from there. And the book definitely makes a lot more hay out of like the comparison between like this power that is emitted by the Tommyknockers, which is sort of this telepathic, electromagnetic, weird stuff represented by green light,
Soylent Green.
lots of green, and you kind of paralleling that with like nuclear power. A lot of the symptoms that people in the book have, and a little bit in the movie, like loss of teeth, loss of hair, like general, decay of the body, is very radiation sickness like. And I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel to get drawn.
He name drops Chernobyl in it at some point. I remember.
Yeah, which had at the time of the book coming out had just happened. Like I think
Right.
the year Chernobyl was like 86, I think, and the book comes out in 87. So it would have been happening right after, or right before King was writing the book, and it was obviously on his mind. And I think
he was doing like a ton of. I mean, we sort of mentioned it, but this is like the book that is considered his like. This was his rock bottom, was writing this book, and he was doing so much cocaine, and I could totally envision like a coked out, paranoid Stephen King reading about Chernobyl in the paper and reading about, there's still like that Cold War sort of like ripple effect happening in the 80s. He probably was like buying into all of it, freaking out on these like coke benders and just writing it into here.
Yeah, he definitely. I mean, like the alien ship and all the changes it exerts on the town, especially in the book, is like kind of a catch-all for a lot of things that Stephen King is clearly afraid of. Like nuclear threats, but the ship is also kind of like an addictive thing, like alcohol or drugs. And it's also kind of unknowable, like the Lovecraft story. It's kind of a lot of things put together. And I think one of the things, I mean, and I keep talking about the book too much here, but in general, I think one of the things that would make this a more effective story in general would be if you showed less of the aliens, because it loses a little bit of mystique when you actually see the aliens, and it grounds itself more than I think some of the spookiest stuff that's implied by either story is that there's kind of this like completely unknowable alien energy that can just sort of completely rewire how like reality works, and it can spread and like affect all these things. But when you get to the heart of it, and they're just aliens with like arms and legs and eyes and teeth, and like they kind of just look like aliens, I feel like it's a little less spooky, even though I kind of liked the look of the rubber aliens in the movie. I think that's one of the sort of the potential things that if this was going to be like a top tier alien story, I think that's the stuff that I always find the most scary. I mean, I don't know, we can talk about this in general too. I don't know, like, what do you like? Aliens have never been that scary to me. I think they're like a cool idea, and I hope they're real. But like for me, as like a horror element, it's hard to make them scary. Like, has there ever been like an alien movie or story or anything that's like spooked you guys?
I mean, Alien.
The
Yeah.
movie Alien is a solid contender. Yeah, that's
And
probably
that one's like pretty like cosmically scary. In addition to having a literal scary alien in.
yeah.
And I mean, think about how well, because that's immediately what came to my mind. Think about how well they did it, like teasing out the alien and that, like the whole time. Like most of the time, it was crawling in spaces, or there'd be like lights flashing. You'd only get like glimpses of it, besides at the very end, we see it float away. But like, how fucking effective was it? You know, like it blended into like the mechanics of the ship sometimes, like all that. Oh, like that's how you do it. You know?
When you got to look, and I think this is a good point, right? Is like aliens, like the thing that's always bothered me, and like maybe I'm showing my bias here, right? Because like I'm a biologist, so like I think about things in that framework. And one of the things that always bothers me about aliens in movies is that we make them look like an animal that would live on Earth. Like they have two legs, they have eyes, they have a head, they walk
Yeah.
upright, like they use steering wheels, you know, like, and it's like, I think the coolest shit you could do with aliens is like try to imagine something that would exist like in a completely different,
Yeah.
on a different planet, like in a different, totally different set of conditions. And that's always sort of what ends up being hard to do in fiction, but if done right, is really effective. I think Alien gets at that. I mean, sure, the thing has like hands and claws and stuff, but that H.R. Geiger design is so fucking creepy and weird and like phallic, and like there's just all these like weird fucked up things about it that are like upsetting, and it makes it
straight
work.
out of a Danzig album cover, man. I love it.
Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
say this to go back to your question. Growing up as a kid in the 90s, you guys probably remember this, but like there was like a while, and I think it had to do a lot with like the X-Files too, but there was a while where Fox, the channel Fox, was like obsessed with aliens. Like they would like every Sunday night, sometimes they would like build it into like the Sunday night thing with X-Files, where it'd be like, oh, like UFOs caught on camera. And like, I mean, growing up in the 90s is like so beautiful because like that, the found footage, what everyone called it back then, and the, like tying it into like unsolved mysteries and like things that were like captured on like camcorder. Even back then, it looked creepy, and to this day, it still looks creepy compared to like what you see if someone films something on like their iPhone or something like that. There was just like this beautiful era of technology when things were being recorded to tape, where it just looked fucking creepy. And I like as a kid, like hook, line, and sinker, I was all into like when they would show like those like UFOs caught on camera, and you hear the sleazy narrator voice. I remember the UPN channel had this thing called like an event at like Evergreen Lake or something like that. It was like 99 or 2000. Or it's this family. It's like all found footage style. It's like very much like Blair Witch. It probably came out like a year after because they were trying to cash in on it, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this family. Look it up. I think it's on YouTube. Where it's this family whose house starts being like essentially like all these fucking crazy things happen at their houses because like aliens are landing. So like the lights are turning on and off. Like the ice machine starts shooting out ice, but it's all being caught like on a tape thing. It looks like shit, and it's so effective because of that. So like, yeah, there was a while where I was really spooked by the concept of aliens and like I was really into it. So I'm sure that this movie played a part of it as well. Like I definitely was like that 90s boy getting all up on aliens and shit.
Well, the 90s seemed to be like a golden era for alien stuff. And I think it's partially because of like what you mentioned, like it was like a sweet niche for technology where like a handheld camcorder was something that was like relatively common. Like a lot of people had them, but they look like shit. So it makes it scarier and it makes it easier for you to not see how real or not real something is. And it conceals any details that are going to kind of pull you out of it or make you question it. And then I think also like, I don't know, on like some socio-political level, like the 90s was a weird, like the Cold War was over. We didn't really have like a big geopolitical enemy anymore. We weren't afraid of the Russians. And so I think people just started getting afraid of like, I don't know. I mean, it's, you know, there's deeper readings to be done on all that. But like, I think people got afraid of aliens because they were like, it was like people were sort of afraid of the government, but kind of not afraid of the government. And I don't know. It was like a weird.
We had Oliver Stone's JFK.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's another movie.
I wonder if we were flooded with alien stuff in order to make the revelations of the JFK movie and the documents that were released along with it, in order to make that all seem like, oh, that's just wacky conspiracy theory stuff, man.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, does it not? Yeah.
I have to say real quickly because I had to Google it. It's called Alien Abduction Incident in Lake County. Lake County, right by all three of us.
Oh
Came
yeah.
out came out in 1998. I checked it out again like not long ago because it was on YouTube. I highly suggest it's a fun watch if you guys are ever bored, just throw it on. It's a
I'm
fun
writing it down.
found footage. Yeah. Shit, so that might even been right before Blair Witch. Yeah,
And honestly,
they caught it at a good time.
even if it was real, even if it was actually footage of an alien abduction incident in Lake County, that would be like the third scariest thing happening in Lake County on any given night. I don't know if you've been
Yeah.
there recently, but that place is a wild little place up there.
Yeah.
It's amazing what poverty will do to a region. But yeah, I think like alien stuff. I think there's another kind of interesting thing about this movie adaptation, right? Because the movie comes out in '93, book is written in '86, '87. So you have the two together straddle that boundary between the '80s kind of Reagan era Cold War fears and then that kind of '90s limbo conspiracy phase. And the X-Files tapped really strongly into that, and a lot of other '90s media did. And the '80s stuff is very different. So I think that also kind of, I mean, the movie I wouldn't say has enough thematic depth to it to really get at that on any sort of deeper level. But I wonder if there was any sort of any loss of some of those more '80s-y themes, like especially the nuclear stuff, really gets dropped from the movie. And I wonder if any of that had to do. I wonder, I doubt it was a conscious decision, but I wonder if part of it was because that stuff wasn't really in vogue anymore. We weren't as scared of nukes because no one's who's going to shoot them at us.
They dropped in my opinion, they dropped all the themes, even the inner town paranoia. Because in the book, it wasn't that they're just getting kind of crazy towards the non believers or whatever what do they keep becomers or whatever. It's in the book he hits at the fact that they become all very horny, which they kind of show that in the movie. But they all become very rage filled as well, and even towards each other. There's one scene where someone literally punches her hand through another person's face, and because they become so destitute, their flesh and stuff, and transparent, their fingers literally just go right through their cheek and stuff.
Yeah, because
they're all still filled with they're all becoming very primal, and they drop that aspect of it. I don't even I don't even know if you could really hit a theme if we're talking strictly the miniseries, the movie, whatever you want to call it. It's very thematically empty in many ways, other than it's just this thing is happening in this town.
Yeah, just I'd say the addiction stuff is really right. Only sort of not subtlety, but the only theme that it really tries to go for is the addiction metaphor, and that by itself is stretched pretty thin, I think.
Well, they have to say it directly. I think Bobby screams at Jim or Jimmy Smits at one point. He's just basically straight up is that ship is like alcohol to you. You are addicted to this ship, or no, I'm sorry. He says that to her. The other way around. He basically is this ship is like drink. He's says this is the theme of the movie. That ship is the way that alcohol is for me to you. You are addicted to it and you can't stop doing it, which is, heavy-handed, but yeah, it's a good theme. And I'm glad they kept something of that because, yeah, you really lose a lot of the buildup that you get in the book because the book kind of chronicles the descent of this whole town into total chaos, basically. All these people become super smart and they're inventing all these weird gizmos, and they show that in the movie too. Bobby invents she fixes her water heater with this crazy rig that makes the water super hot, and she invents that telepathic typewriter that she can write her book in her sleep with, and those are things from the book as well. And the evil postwoman has the lipstick that she can vaporize people with. They made her more of a character. Funny because she's a minor character in the book.
They really, and God bless them for it, because I'm all for having Tracy Lords. I mean, it's that's the queen of camp right there.
She's
so if
chewing on the scenery. Yeah.
If your movie's gonna be like that, go all in with the Tracy Lord scene.
I was looking at old reviews from when this came out, and a couple of them pointed out that she's the only one that seems to understand the material.
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree.
Fully,
I think that's a good point.
That it's B-movie schlock.
I'll say this too: the scene when she's going after Bobby in the shed near the end, I actually think she's great in that scene. Like I think her acting up to a certain point is like extremely over the top, like camp and stuff. But then when she finally is like gone past the point where she's not even like attempting to hide anymore, and she's all sweaty and looks like shit, I actually think that she's knocking it out of the park in every scene that she's in. Like
Yeah.
she looks very believable as like a fucked up, like pissed off and become person.
Speaking
Well,
of
working
knocking
with-
it out of go on.
Oh no, go ahead.
Speaking of knocking it out of the park, there's one moment in this that made me laugh so hard. Like
Mhm.
full on we had to pause the movie so that I could get my laughing fit over with. And it's
Which one?
when the kid goes missing and they get the posse together and they're like, we have to find him before nightfall. And it cuts to the crowd and it is the oldest people you have ever seen. And it just keeps showing them in increasingly like enfeebled like positions. Like they're like, all right, team, break, we're gonna go find them. In the background you see someone like leading one of the old people by the arm.
I didn't catch that.
Laugh so hard.
Like we got to bring the
Uh,
geezers with us.
Yeah, it's like this is the posse that you got together to like for this pressing issue of finding this kid before nightfall. It's these people who can't even walk without.
Yeah, we got to
I
find
also
this
have
kid
to point
immediately.
out- I have to point out that way. Okay, so the kid makes his little brother disappear. He's doing a magic show. He's doing all the classic boring ass shit, so you can see everyone in the crowd's like, Then his brother gets up on the thing. He makes his brother disappear, and everyone in the crowd looks at each other like, holy shit, that was a good trick. And they all immediately stand up, and they're pissed off for no reason. They're just like, the kid's like, wait, where are you guys going? And they're like, oh, haven't you had enough already? Let's go open presents. Like, his parents are the worst. They just watched a human disappear. Like, if that was my kid, I'd be like, I'd give them a little bit more props, but they're just so insistent to go right inside, just right to that cake and presents.
Yeah, they're like, enough of this shit. Yeah, like even though he's like, literally made a child disappear before their very eyes.
The whole crowd instantly stands up, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, go fuck myself with my great."
Well, the scene was over.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
the final straw. Like, I was on board when he pulled the coin out of the kid's ear, but now that he made a child, literally done like a magic feat before our very eyes. Like, I'm done. Like,
Two other scenes I had to quickly shout out to, as far as made me like actually like laugh out loud, was the vet office, because this vet has a cobra, an
cobra. I was gonna
alligator,
say,
Yeah,
an
It was like
owl.
someone brought a cobra to the vet. Like, you can't own a cobra legally. I don't think. Like, I don't even know where you get one.
This vet office is fucking in this small like New England town. This vet office apparently like handles like Barnum and Bailey's whole entire crew. And then the other thing that made me laugh was the oh shit, I just lost it, didn't I? Oh, the dolls. Okay, so the doll scene used to fuck me up as a kid, and now watching it as an adult, so funny now. I even made a joke about this online. I was just like, your prop department, you're like, okay, I'm tasking you with like finding the like scariest dolls to come to life, and they choose to be the lead-in doll to be her murderer, the leader hosen fucking like.
he does a little
yodeling.
Hitler salute.
Yeah, he did. He did the little thing. I was like, oh my god.
Little Nazi doll. Yeah.
But it was so funny because it's just like, of all the ones that look so much creepier and shit like that, they choose the one that looks like straight out of Sound of Music or something like that, like
It's
Rolf.
It's so bizarre too because I thought that was the sheriff's office that
Is
the
it
dolls
not?
were in. It is not, because it shows her at her desk and it's a totally different room. So
I
there
think
is
she
a
says,
room.
like-
Oh,
There's a room in the police station dedicated just to the sheriff's doll collection.
Honestly, believable for like a small
for
Maine
a small
town. They're
town.
like,
In
yeah,
the
our
80s,
sheriff,
yeah.
she's like good at her job. She has to have
Yeah,
a doll room.
I guess
though.
in Storm of the Century, the sheriff was at a grocery store.
Yeah, they can't have a full sheriff's office, really.
No.
I thought the dolls were like, I mean, they're goofy, but like, I think because they did use practical effects and stuff, they look pretty good. I
I'll
thought
shut
they
that
looked
up.
convincingly creepy. And I think the fact that they weren't like overly creepy style dolls almost helped a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the Annabelle, that doll from the Conjuring movies, and they made the whole spin-off and all that. Like, that doll looks like so fucked up. Like even before it's haunted, it's like the scariest looking doll in the
I
world.
know. It's like no one would
It's
ever
like,
want that doll.
why
in
would
their
a
house.
child want that fucking doll? But like, have you ever seen like, because it's apparently quote unquote based on a true story or whatever, and the picture of like the actual
What?
Annabelle doll is like
It's a Raggedy Ann doll.
it's a Raggedy Ann doll. It does not look
Yeah, that's
scary
right.
at all. Which is
When I was in middle
think-
school, I went over to my friend, also named Charlie's house, and well, it was to his grandparents' house, and they had a doll room, and it was all Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Ann dolls, and it was creepy.
doll
Yeah,
rooms
fuck
fucking
that.
suck. My aunt has a doll room, and I'm going there this weekend actually, and I'm like not looking forward to it. I usually do have to stay in the doll room, and I've never quite gotten used to it because they're all up on like a shelf near the ceiling, and they look down at you, and they're all like China dolls too, so they have like those like porcelain heads and eyes and shit. Not a fan.
Dip, brother, dip. Don't go. I'm
Hey,
telling you now.
everything else about it's fine. It's just the doll room.
Conjuring.
So
Speaking of Conjuring, real quickly, I don't know if you guys saw in your research, but supposedly James Wan, the guy who made Conjuring, supposedly he bought the rights to Tommyknockers and he
Yeah,
wants
he's
to
supposed
remake
to be
it.
producing it.
Oh, really? I did not hear that. That's interesting. I'd be curious to see how a remake of this would go.
I'd be interested. I don't
Yeah.
have high hopes, but I'd
I'll
I'd
watch it. Yeah, I'm like a hog at the trough with this stuff. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
even if it's not gonna be good, I'll probably watch it. Like, I've watched there's been a pretty good renaissance of Stephen King adaptations, some of which we'll get to on this show, or all of which eventually. Yeah, I'd be curious to see sort of how it fares. I think it's a story that's got a lot of potential, right? You have alien shit, you have like the small town going crazy stuff, you have kind of the deeper weird elements, capital W weird elements of like reality kind of shifting and people making all these crazy inventions, and then you have kind of the interpersonal stuff that flows from that. There's a lot of potential in it, and
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think the miniseries nails the potential necessarily. A lot of it felt very like there was kind of like a lot of weird jumps where it would be like people kind of be mostly acting normal, and then suddenly like they're all out in the woods. And
Yeah, they're all.
they all look crazy suddenly. And in the
They had
book,
to,
it's like
jump it up. They were like, "All right, we need to all have to be out there." The actors are
Right.
actually helping dig up.
all
the
right,
set.
they're nuts now. Just go for it.
Yeah.
Well, and in the book, they really do decay in such a horrific way.
Mhm.
There's a lot of like full on body horror like shit in the book. It's
Yeah.
like Cronenberg stuff. And
Very much
it's
so.
described in great detail of just people's hair and teeth and falling out and people growing weird masses. It's just like nasty shit. So they're a bunch of mutants by the end. But in the movie, because it's TV and because their budget is different or whatever, they just kind of put like dark eye makeup under their. They just look like
Yeah.
they look like they've just been like on a meth binge. They're just
Yeah.
like they go out in the woods and like did some meth for like 4 or 5 days, and they're like, that's probably what you'd look like if you got hit with the alien brainwaves.
Bobby full on did look like a meth addict in Lake
Yeah.
County.
Yeah, which again, not a terrible choice because it's like that.
No.
Yeah, it's a good low key way to do it. It's not as overtly horrifying as what is described in the book, but it's like, okay, I can see that person has been unduly influenced by something negative, and it's made them look very tired.
Yeah. Can I, if we have time, can I shout out like 2 more things real quickly?
Please, no,
Yeah,
please.
go for it.
We got plenty to talk about.
I have to always shout out. These are like absolute nothingness, but I always love to shout out a classic Straight Jacket Looney Bin scene, which when they throw that one girl in the padded cell. I mean, that's just like the sign of like a good bad movie is when it shows like someone legit in a straight jacket and they're murmuring the title of the movie. And then I also got a kick. You guys mentioned it before, but I'm sorry. I feel like we have to highlight when Jimmy Smits throws that one alien body because yes, there is weight to it, and I love good practical effects. Was into it, but when he throws it, nothing about the body shifts. It's just literally like the arms are outside. It's no different than like a dad throwing like a pool toy into the pool of his kid. It just had the exact same sort. You could feel that it was kind of light, so you could feel that it almost picked up air for a second. Like it was just kind of like floated to its spot.
Yeah,
and that I got a good kick out of that. That I could watch that over and over again. Oh, and also one other thing was I got a kick out of Tracy Lords, like for no reason, I don't know, it was inexplicable, but she wore her post office uniform to the 4th of July party, which I thought
she takes her fucking business seriously. Yeah, I mean, there's so many funny things about that character. she's like the hottest woman that's ever worked at the postal service for some reason in like the middle of nowhere is what we're led to believe. And then she's like a complete like villain, like but like almost immediately like is like a total like yeah like a I don't know like yeah like total villain. She's got like the crazy lipstick thing and like
Yeah.
she's just chewing on the scenery, and then yeah she's like trying to fuck everyone by the end. And like I think that it's obviously meant to be like the Tommyknocker influence like makes everyone like really like horny and stuff. And then I think like all the actors got that note, and then she like really took it to heart. It was like being like fucking like the Jessica Rabbit of the postal service, and is just is going after everyone.
If it's 93 and you look like Tracy Lords and you live in New Haven, you are leaving New Haven to go become Tracy Lords.
True, yeah. Or you could
getting a fake ID,
yeah,
and shooting a few movies.
Few Tommyknockers, yeah.
One weird little detail that I wanted to bring up is in the kids in Hilly's bedroom when he has a poster for the movie Lair of the White Worm.
What a strange choice. Yeah.
The bizarre Ken Russell movie?
I think so.
Which is like a weird horny movie about like a snake lady.
Yes.
So that shows
that was in his room?
Yeah, it was up above. It was like because there was a vaulted ceiling, I think, and it was up on the vaulted ceiling, and it's the Snake Lady. And so that shows that the people who made this movie like are familiar with like weird, goofy schlock.
Yeah,
but they just forgot to put much of it in their movie.
It's an old pulp story too, The Lair of the White Worm, and it's not very good. I read it a long time ago.
Bram Stoker.
Yeah. Oh, it is. That's right. It's Bram Stoker.
Yeah, more like Bram stroked out because he
wrote
it
not good
after he had a stroke, and it doesn't make any sense.
I was hoping there would be a worm in it. There's not really a worm in it, which was disappointing.
Well, there's don't put that in the title. Tommyknockers in this movie. Technically, it's just aliens.
You do see him.
Is Tommyknockers real? Is that like a real?
I wonder that. Yeah, I should have looked this up, but yeah, I don't know if the rhymes that he bases the idea of the Tommyknockers on are real or not. I would assume not, but we'll have to find out. We need like an assistant to Google things for us as we work or something. But,
if King made up like the actual like fake like lore of something and called that's really impressive because I just always assumed I never even until this very moment even thought to question it. I just assumed it was like old Irish lore or some shit.
Yeah,
he really made that up. That's actually impressive because that it vibes right with me. Like it's like, oh yeah, that's something that's been around for fucking centuries. The Tommyknockers.
Yeah, he has a knack for shit like that, for sure. Yeah, he does definitely make it sound like a real folk rhyme about, something spooky.
Do we know what his thoughts are on this? Because he's very vocal about some things and not about others as far as adaptions go. Do you guys know if he said anything?
I found some quote where he said he didn't care for it.
Yeah, I think that's all I found too. And I think to be fair, he also doesn't think that the book itself was very good.
Yeah,
I think
he's like 2015, he called it a quote terrible book,
which is funny because it's like the man who wrote the book has a different. I again don't think it's that bad of a book. I was prepared to like. That's part of the reason I got an audio because I was like, I don't know if I want to read this whole thing, and it probably would have been. It's a long book and it's probably too long, but I don't think it's that bad of a book, honestly. And
no. It's
got a lot of cool stuff in it, and I like when he does stuff that's different from his usual milieu, for lack of a better word.
He only has, I think he only has one other straight up aliens novel, and it's also been poorly received, and the adaptation was poorly received, and that's Dreamcatcher.
Which one's that?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, right. But again, the movie I did not care for that one, but that book, I'm a fucking King apologist, man. Even his lesser stuff.
Oh, we are too. Yeah, no worries.
And I really like the book of Dreamcatcher. He has a way of like, again, I don't want to steal my guest's words, but my guest last week, Ashley Cassidy she actually is one of the hosts on the Losers Club podcast, which is a podcast.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Can you put us in touch with her?
Absolutely. I told her she was on this. She's aware of the existence of the show, my friends.
She's contacting her attorneys as we speak. Yeah.
She's talked about, because we talked about very briefly about Dreamcatcher, and she was saying like how like it's cool that at the very least it's like the themes that he always brings into it, which I agree. Like, if you guys did you read Doctor Sleep?
Yeah.
No, I haven't read it. I saw the movie, but didn't.
You
I'm
saw
the
the
way
movie.
around.
So you know how like she's going through like the filing cabinet in the one lady's head. It's like they're
Mhm.
talking about that in Dreamcatcher too. I love the idea that King
Yeah.
brings back these ideas in movies where it's like, oh, everyone's mind is like a filing cabinet full of our secrets, and like certain people with certain abilities can go in there and just like go through it like it's a library or something like that. Like, that's creeps me out, and I love it. I get
It's a
jazzed
good
on
one.
that. Yeah,
Well, he does that in our last episode. That happens in Storm of the Century too. The villain, the devil, the wizard guy. His
Andre
whole deal is
Linoge.
he can go around. Yeah, Linoge. He can go around and just pull secrets out of people's heads and say them to everyone to shock people. It's definitely a common theme, and it's a really good one that he brings up in a lot of this stuff.
I know I'm pulling away from the miniseries, but I do want to shout out too, in the book, The Tommyknockers, one of like the most effective scenes in the book, I should say, because I'm a big fan of King interweaving like different things. And Tommyknockers, the book is filled with like, there's so many characters and allusions to other works of his. And
Pennywise shows up.
Yeah, Penny, and that's like one of the creepiest, because it talks about how like they're leaving town and they drive to Derry, and the guy's like so fucked up because of like what has been happening in the Tommyknock in New Haven. He's so fucked up, and talks about how like he looks up and sees a clown with silver dollar eyes, and he thinks like, oh my gosh, I'm just seeing that, like that's not actually
Yeah,
there.
it's just
And
like a
that's
little
all the-
Easter egg. I really like that too.
And I think that to me, even just saying that, like I get a little goosebumps because I'm like, oh, imagine like driving, like you're so fucked up, and you see Pennywise. And I remember too at the end of Tommyknockers, I think they allude to, I always forget the name of it, but it's like that secret government organization that they talk a lot about, Firestarter.
Oh,
They
really?
go in, they go into the town of New Haven. I don't want to ruin it if you guys are going to if you guys are still in the middle of reading it, but anywho, they allude
No,
to
please.
Well, they go in after the Tommyknockers ship. All that goes down. That organization goes in and basically like kills everyone that's in town, and like wipes the whole town down, because like since it's like aliens are associated with the government and shit. Which,
Okay.
if they'd done that, they couldn't have in this miniseries. They just couldn't. It didn't have like the balls to do something like that.
Yeah.
But that would be so sick if James Wan or whoever does adapt this, if they hit that, that'd be so cool, because that is the perfect like footnote to end that movie on, because it adds like it's too Hollywood to just end on like a spacecraft blowing up, blah blah. But like you have it end with like a special like Metal Gear Solid like kind of epilogue thing, where it's like you see them going around just killing everyone and like saying like this never happened, shut this town down. Like fuck yeah, I'm all into that.
Yeah.
Well, the book definitely
Speaking
has
of
more of a bummer ending. I mean, Bobby Anderson never like in the movie she pulls back, right? She kind of comes out of her trance and kind of saves the day, or helps Jimmy Smith save the day at the end of the movie. In the book, she's just like fully gone, and there's this like showdown between her and Jim Gardner, where he shoots her and she forces him to take a bunch of Valium in an attempt to kill him. And then he ends up like getting the jump on her and shooting her because she can't read his mind, and he shoots her and kills her, and then he kind of takes the ship and flies it away, and then all the Tommyknockers, which are now the townspeople, are killed as the ship like takes off. Basically, it's like a big forest fire and shit.
Yeah.
So it's definitely more of a downer ending, as opposed to the movie where they it seems like it's sort of a reversible situation. Makes sense for TV, but I like the book.
Yes. I mean,
He
overall,
Oh, go ahead,
I
please.
think I was just gonna say, I think overall there's just, and that's true with the It miniseries as well, which I like the It miniseries that they made in the '90s or whenever they made that, but there's just so much like, and I think, if maybe they could spread it out to like 4 episodes, or if it was like a Netflix 10 episode series thing, you'd be able to make something. You definitely would be able to have something to work with, or like an 8 episode series, like an HBO, mini series run. But just two fucking episodes, that's it. Like for like a book that's like 800 pages or something. Come on
Yeah.
now.
Well, on that note, we should probably wrap things up.
Sure thing.
We have gone over the allotted time, so thank you to producer Jesse
My bad.
for bearing with us while we did some Tommy talking. But before we go, Eric, do you want to plug anything you got coming up that you want us to point people towards?
Yeah. So again, my name is Eric Wynn, aka the Eric Wynn. I host a show called Goth Yearbook and another show called Goth Yearbook Radio. And we've been on hiatus, but actually next week is when we kind of start coming back. We've been pre-recording a lot of episodes. And our first episode back is Ashley Cassidy, who hosts a great podcast called Keep It Weird with her friend Lauren. And then she is also part of like the roundtable for the Losers Club. She's been on like a handful of episodes. I don't think she's been like a great many because she's kind of like a newer person on there. But check it out. I mean, if you're a Stephen King fan, I'm sure you've heard of it. But yeah, she'll be on. We'll be dropping that episode next Wednesday, I believe, and then she also curated a playlist for my radio show, which is on Monday nights on krjf.org. Just go to my Instagram at @GothYearbook. I post all day long.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Eric, thank you so much for coming on, and I think this was a really awesome choice to talk about. I think it's like it's a weird Stephen King book. It's a weird miniseries, and I mean, like I said, it wasn't like I don't think it's his best or it's the best adaptation of his work, but I really enjoyed it and I enjoyed talking about it. So thanks again for suggesting it, and we would love to have you back to talk about any of the other adaptations, including Needful Things or any of the other ones that you really like. So,
Langoliers,
bring you back.
Charlie and Court, thank you guys so much.
Oh, yeah.
Langoliers, I call dibs on it. No one does.
Sick. I haven't seen that one. I read The Langoliers on a plane, which is the best place to read it.
Oh, yeah.
So I will have to watch that. Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back for Langoliers.
Perfect. Hell yeah. Thanks, guys.
Alrighty. Well, with that, thanks everyone in the audience for watching and listening to our show again. We'll be back next month with another Stephen King adaptation to talk about. And in the meantime, please check out all the other shows at Stab Comedy Theater. It's a great theater. They do all sorts of really cool stuff. And we're very happy to be doing a show through them. And until next time, I'm Charlie, and this is my co-host.
I'm Court.
And yeah, we'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Oh, that's a
All right.
little louder
Thanks,
than
Jesse.
that. Sorry. That's it for us for tonight. Come back here tomorrow, 4 p.m. for some Inside the Box. Getting your Jackbox and Jackbox adjacent games. Let's see where we can send the remaining Twitch audience, which was healthy, guys.
Oh, yeah?
You guys got to keep track of the chat. They've got some stuff that they're...
Oh, yeah. I need to have a window open next time so we can, like, see what the audience is saying.
Yeah. But let's send you guys over to, I don't know, how about All Board? Why not? Hold on for the raid. I'll see you guys back here tomorrow at 5. Have a good night. Or 4. If you show up at 5, that's fine too. But 4 is, you know what? Have a good night.
Can't stop, addicted to the shindig. Chop top, he says I'm gonna win big. Choose not a life of imitation. Distant cousin to the reservation. Defunct the pistol that you pay for. This punk the feeling that you stay for. In time, I want to be your best friend. East side lovers living.